In part one, we talked about how you communicate with yourself, your internal communication. In part two, your close associates. Well, in part three, in the art of communicating, we talk about how to interact with everyone else, the world. So we are Painted Porch Strategies, training and advisory services company that helps you be more mindful, helps you communicate more effectively, and helps you work as a team so you win championships. I'm Rob Hunter, the MC, the Master of Communication, joined by Amy Yak, our CEO, Chief Evolution Officer, and Sierra Ram Cantrell, who is our Chief Joy Officer. We have created programs that really tie into Thich Nhat Hanh, the Buddhist monk's book, very nicely. So I want to ask Sierra first. In the third and final section of this book, it's a very stoic-based principle, which we love here at Painted Porch Strategies because of this principle that all humans are meant to collaborate. This is what Mr. Hahn is getting at in the final section of the book. So Sierra, what jumped out at you as a way to effectively communicate with people you might disagree with or have different points of view on?
He gave us a lot of great tools in dealing with, and I love the word he uses, community. So community are people that are around you. That doesn't necessarily mean they're your best friends, but they are part of a community. He gives us a lot of great tools, and I had a lot of favorites, but I think my favorite was the cake in the refrigerator.
Explain what that is, if you would.
So the idea is, he says it doesn't have to be an actual cake, and it doesn't have to actually be in the refrigerator, but it was a disarming technique that he utilizes when things get a little too heated, a little too intense, is for somebody to pause that argument and say, I just remembered there's a cake in the refrigerator. And that's a signal to pause and enjoy something. He said it could be boil a cup of tea that you share together. It's doing something different. It's creating that pause as a way of sharing something together. And then maybe you get back into it later, or sometimes when you take that pause, things just kind of dissipate and move on into the ether.
Yeah, it allows you that period to pause and maybe have a little bit of reflection or perspective taking in that moment. I agree. I loved it. Rob and I in the past, we've done a lot of various personal development, especially Tony Robbins, a lot of his teachings. And one of the things that they talk about is interrupting the pattern. And interrupting the pattern, this cake in the refrigerator is a wonderful comparative to that, where if it seems like things are going down a certain path, or someone is getting super, super focused on one thing and one thing only, and they're not able to step out and take a broader perspective, it's just causing that interruption. And cake in the refrigerator, or, I have to go move my car, or whatever it might be. It's a way to just interrupt it, to give that cue to say, hey, you know what? I think this is a moment that we have to just take a pause and reconnect into our community, which I agree. I loved that he said that the word communication and community actually have the same Latin root, which means to impart, share, or make common. And that's such a beautiful way to think about it, that when we communicate, we're trying to make common our ideas, our perspectives, and to share that with someone that we share very much in common, even if we don't necessarily agree on everything.
And that's the key, because we're not going to agree on everything. I mean, if you follow politics like I do, just look at the way the debate is, especially the social media debate. It is divisive on purpose. And that is the opposite of what this book is about. So it is about almost putting yourself aside. And I want to add in another element here that he gives you a tool on, is if you are hurt. So like, say Amy says something that hurts me. Again, give yourself that space. And you can even write a letter and say, hey, what you said on this date when you said this really hurt me. I would like to talk to you about it in 4 or 5 days or 3 days, because that space allows you to kind of process the emotions. And it is almost like the world rewards the emotional reaction right now, whether it's on Twitter, you might get retweets, or Facebook, you might get likes in a discussion. So what he is suggesting, which I agree with, is the opposite of that, is everything doesn't have to be solved right now in the moment, especially if emotions are high. Because we all know, not only three of us, but you as well, when you speak emotionally, anger, for example, you say things you wish you hadn't. You say things you want to be like, I want to pull that back in. So what Take is suggesting is to give yourself that space to go either get the cake out of the fridge. If you need more time, give yourself more time. That's what I love about this, because we don't give ourselves permission often to take time, because we also live in a world that's technologically connected that seems to be always be in a rush. Matter of fact, we just had the discussion about me. I always feel like I'm in a rush. So it's like, it's okay. Take your time, work on it the way you need to work on it. So that was one of my other main takeaways, because that helps you interact with other people so you can handle disagreements, because we all have judgments and experiences that lead to judgments and biases that sometimes get tied to emotions, which can make it difficult to communicate.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, one of the things that he mentions really early in chapter 7, which is creating community in the world, is he says, and I quote, "Systemic change can't be achieved without the energy of community." And I think that's true in all areas of our life, especially what we like to focus on on our painted porch with our clients, especially our clients in the staffing community, is this idea of how do you make change real? And so often with change, he even cites it here, we tend to lean towards the technology components that are going to help create change, whether that's with, say, example, with climate change and having renewables for, EV cars or solar panels or wind power. That is a tool, that's a technology. We think that that is going to be the thing that's going to solve us. But ultimately, the only way those things get adopted is through the adoption and energy of a community. And so that's where you have to have the people, the community, and the communication that is happening to then allow for the technology to do what the technology is trying to do. But it all starts and ends with people and the community and communication that you are creating or not creating within it. One of the things, oh, sorry, I was going to add one other thing. He talks about, and for someone who might be reading this, if you're joining us and you're not a Buddhist, you're not practicing Buddhism, he does talk about here how there's this idea of having a shared silence or a meditative chanting. And when I saw that, I was like, well, I don't think necessarily meditative chanting is going to happen in a business world unless your business is a Buddhist monastery. But I thought, it reminded me, Sierra, of a mantra, right? A mantra or a mission statement. And it's the same premise where it's something that you are repeating and sharing together. So that way you can create that sense of community and shared change in the world. It made me think of you when how you talk about mantras.
Yeah, a mantra is definitely helpful. A tool that I think is really simple that you could easily integrate in just about any team is, he talks about drink your tea. Drink your tea. All right. Mm-hmm. So this is literally, I'm actually going to have us do this. Does everybody have something to drink nearby?
Me too.
Okay.
I'll share my tea with you, Rob.
So just about for the next minute, all we're going to do is we're just going to be about drinking whatever's in the cup. All right. So all I want you to do is take a deep breath in through your nose and out through your nose. Good. And then hold the cup in your hands or look at the cup. Take a look at the contents. And then I want you to take a sip or two, and all I want you to focus on is just taking that sip. Just enjoy the tea. Just be present with the tea. What does it feel like? What's the temperature? What's the texture? What's the taste? How does the cup feel? Take another breath with the tea. Okay, and that's it.
Drink your tea.
Drink your tea. Literally a minute. You could incorporate this at the start of any meeting Or it could even be the cake in the refrigerator moment. Let's just have a drink your tea. Grab your tea, just take a drink, and it's just going to bring you back to the present moment. And I feel different than I did just a minute ago. I feel a lot calmer.
And I think that that is what he gets at in this book is it's okay to just be, number one, which, no one teaches us how to do that. And to lower the expectations of where you're supposed to be at this point in your life. Well, I should be doing this. I should be this. I should be that. Okay, fine. But you got to take some action, a little bit action, because a little bit action every day eventually leads to a lot of action. So that's really what he cautions in the third part of the book too, is that you don't have to jump into the deep end of the pool and make all these massive changes in your entire life. No, change one thing, something as simple as taking 60 seconds when you drink your tea or your coffee in the morning to just drink the tea or coffee, to not stress about all the meetings you have today or all the things you got to do or whatever the case may be. It's going to be fine. A minute is a huge step forward if you've never done it. So maybe then you take 90 seconds in a week or two, or maybe it takes you a month to get to 90 seconds. But he makes a point too that how often do we take time to just, when we walk, to just enjoy the fact that you can take a step and really just focus on that step. So if you park your car and you got to walk into your office, or if you don't, you work from home, enjoy the walk down the hallway to go get that coffee. So those little things that can make massive changes in your life and in your world that put you more in control.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, because so often we operate from a sense, or actually a lack of sense. We're in autopilot. We're not aware of what we're doing in any given moment. And so at the end of the day, we end up feeling like what did we accomplish? Or our energy is completely sapped because we're just on autopilot that whole time. Yeah.
And then your day's gone. And you're like, what happened?
And you're like, what happened?
And then your week's gone. And then your month's gone. And then all of a sudden you're like,
You're
where'd the
65.
year go?
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. And then, yeah, you're right. You wake up with that.
Well,
So-
and important to remember too that the author, Thich Nhat Hanh, he passed away out of this realm about a year ago. He's been gone now. But as a monk, you might think he's very disconnected as a monk. He's devoted his life to meditation, prayer, devotion, right? But he very much lives in the real world of trying to bring that mindfulness to everybody. And he worked with several different organizations of retreats, working with groups of people that didn't get along, that didn't like each other, that had drama. And remember, Buddhists are very clear in the idea that life is suffering and we all suffer in some way. And because we are all connected, it is our goal to come from a place of home, being present in yourself, and a place of compassion. So in trying to work with some tools that can work for anybody, he does a great job of giving us some of these tools and some things to think about. When you feel really frustrated, just trying to think that nobody does ill will on purpose. We all mean to do well. We're all trying, we all suffer. If I cut, do you not bleed? Is that sense of true compassion and working together, which ties right into our Stoic principles. There's so many parallels between Stoicism and Buddhism, but I think his goal is to bring some more peace and some more understanding to people.
Mm-hmm.
Because of that suffering part, right? And we know that he says in this book, The Art of Communicating, that we inadvertently cause suffering. And understanding that is a huge aspect in, I'll call it, getting along with anyone, is knowing that you have the ability to cause someone suffering, whether you do it on purpose or not, right? Because again, we're going back to that ill will. And that understanding is massive on how you receive suffering too. Knowing that it's not done on purpose. It's just that person's representation based on where they're at that moment. And he makes this point too, looking at the beauty in that person because every one of us has amazing qualities.
Mm-hmm.
If you look hard enough to find them and you focus on those instead of the one time someone called you a jerk, or whatever the case may be. And he's not saying that this is easy to do, because it is almost what I'm getting out of Buddhism and Stoicism and personal development is learning how to manage your mind and body, because our mind and body is evolved to keep us alive. So all of those survival instincts kick in. Some of them are mind thoughts to keep you stay still, like, nope, we're good, we're comfortable. Nope, stay there, stay there. So that's where I'm not good enough thoughts come up. And then sometimes it's your emotions, right? Those nervous feeling that you get, your body's like, no. We're trying to send you the signal that we're uncomfortable so you stay.
Mm-hmm.
But that's not how you grow. And in order for us all to grow, it takes us each as individuals to do the work that he says out here in 166 pages, which is very easy to read because it's, the book's only that big. So
Mm-hmm.
this is laying the groundwork for you to take some action to be in a better place for yourself, which will then contribute to a better place for the world.
Mm-hmm. And I think through that, Rob, back from the thoughts, what you're thinking, what you're feeling, all of that then culminates into how you communicate. And he talks a lot about that in chapter 8 specifically. And he says, we are always communicating, and our communication is never neutral. And what he classifies as communication starts with thought. And I loved the way he talked about that, is that thinking, he said, thinking is an action. It's something that's happened. It is an action. It's just you have the choice as to what external manifestation of it, if you will, you are going to then take because of that thought. And he talks about this idea that what we communicate, how we communicate, actually continues on beyond us. It's not just a thought. It's not a thought that was there and then it's gone. It has tentacles, it has residuals that it can leave a trail within us, but also anything that we communicate out leaves a trail as well. And that trail can be one that is positive, or it can be one that is harmful or negative. And we have that choice. Yeah.
So, in conclusion, what are the main takeaways from part 1, 2, and or 3? What action steps will you take based on The Art of Communicating by the Buddhist monk Thich Nhat Hanh?
Well, I'll go back to two of his core principles that he talks about, which is the centerpiece of what he classifies as compassionate communication, which is deep listening and loving speech. So being very mindful of being present to listen, not to respond. allow the person to share what they are feeling, what they're going through, what they're experiencing, what their perspective may be. And then through that, allow yourself the space and time that you need to process it. Don't interrupt them, like you always talk about, Sierra. Just be present for them. Give them space, create the space for them to share. And then once you are ready to share, be very mindful of how you're communicating back to them. Because again, back to what we just talked about, and he says here, everything that we say and do bears our signature. So what signature do you want to have written in this world? Do you want it to be one that is a positive messaging or encouraging or supportive messaging that's moving the community forward? Or is it something that's more negative, that's creating more fractures within the shared community that we're a part of?
Yeah. I think that I don't think really everything has come full circle for me yet. I think that this is still, I'm still thinking about some of the concepts in this book. A lot of these are very simple, but sometimes the simplest things can take some time to integrate. I will say, I think the way he presents the information is very accessible. So I think just remembering that things don't always have to be complicated. You can make things very simple. in your listening and communicating back. What about you, Rob?
I think my main takeaway is it comes back to you and what I call in Master Your Message, my program available for you at paintandporchstrategies.com, is how do you tune into yourself? So I've been a radio broadcaster my entire life. So what is your appropriate dial position, your radio station? Where is your place where there's no static? Like, what is your true voice? And how do you find that? I think that's really the key to all of this, because you find yourself and you're confident in yourself and you know who you are, you're much better able to communicate with other people with different beliefs and different biases and different judgments. So that's where I think the most important work lies. So that's where I would advocate you start. That's where I started, and it's made a world of difference for me. And that leads you down the rest of the path in which he takes you, because then you can say, okay, I know who I am, I know what I believe, and no one can change that. And then I can communicate to really get along, because I think that ultimately is, if we all did that, we might vote for different people, we might have different government, we might be more caring and more kind and more compassionate, which of course is the Buddhist goal. So all in all, would we recommend people read this book? I 100% recommend that you read this book. Take some time, read it, do some work.
Yeah, and recognize that this is written from the perspective of a Buddhist monk. So there is some Buddhist principles baked in here, but you can change the label or still get the spirit of what it is that he is trying to convey, and find ways that you can modify it to align with, what feels most comfortable or most accessible to you. I would say, always be mindful of that, because he's really just trying to convey an overarching message of compassionate communication and giving you a lot of different tools that you can leverage, and you can pick and choose. It's a big toolbox. You can pick the tools that make the most sense to you in the situation that you are in that moment.
Yeah, I would definitely recommend. I loved it. I felt like it had a lot of good nuggets, and it just ties back into all of our Stoic principles that we abide by here on the porch. I would definitely recommend it. I would actually recommend reading it more than once, because I think if you read it again in a few months' time or whatever, when you're at a different place, I think you might pick up on something different at a different time. So
different signals. Yeah. So you mentioned you liked the drinking the tea and the cake in the fridge as your two favorite tools, Sierra. Rob, what were yours?
I don't know, offhand. Again, the focus is on you, right, as an individual. So I don't know that. I think just the idea of space would be how I would say that. So however you want to translate space, whatever makes sense for you, whether the tools that he gives you in here are like, yeah, okay, I like the cake, I like the tea. It's just the idea of space. So however you interpret space, whatever you need to do to give yourself space is what I would recommend. I think that is the most important tool that he touches on here. And we touch on in our programs as well. It's finding the right tool that you like to use. So, if you were in construction, maybe you like the hammer or a nail gun, or maybe you like to use the screwdriver, whatever. It's finding that tool that you're comfortable with, that you can go back to over and over again and use in an effective manner. So if these are the ones in here, awesome. If there's another one, amazing. So that's up to you. And the whole idea of reading and learning is discovering ideas and then picking the ideas that vibe with you.
Yep.
So there's our book club for The Art of Communicating. Broke it down in 3 parts. So if you're catching this part first, there's 2 other parts. So rewind it here on YouTube. Don't forget to subscribe. But we do this every month here at Paint and Porch Strategies. So next month, it is Amy's selection. So what are we getting into?
So for next month, we are going to be reading a book focused on Stoicism. And it is called, let me find it, Unoffendable: The Art of Thriving in a World Full of Jerks.
Perfect follow-up to this.
That's a perfect follow-up. So to that end, Sierra, you mentioned before that Buddhism and Stoicism do have a lot of parallels, and it's very true. Even within the Stoic and Buddhist communities, I think I've heard that people refer to Stoicism as Buddhism for the streets. Basically, how do you apply it in the real world day in and day out? Thich Nhat Hanh does a wonderful first step of introducing that with some very easy, accessible, not meditative, chanting, Buddhist monastery type exercises. And so I imagine that we'll get into that a little bit more next month when we read about how to be unoffendable.
So we'll be here with you for Sierra, for Amy. I'm Rob. We're Painted Porch Strategies. Find out more about us at paintedporchstrategies.com. And we'll talk to you next week.